The phone rang at 6 in the morning. Not unusual for a nurse working night shifts, but this wasn't the hospital. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end made my blood freeze. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Miss Torres, this is Agent Rebecca Walsh with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to discuss some unusual activity connected to your Social Security number. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. FBI? Financial crimes? I worked double shifts at Phoenix General, lived in a studio apartment, and my biggest financial decision was whether to buy name-brand cereal. What could they possibly want with me? There's been a pattern of fraudulent applications across multiple states using your personal information. We're seeing credit cards, business loans, even a car dealership financing agreement in Nevada. Miss Torres, when was the last time you applied for credit? My mouth went dry. I haven't. I mean, not in over 2 years. Agent Walsh, I think there's been a mistake. That's what we're hoping to determine. Can you come to our field office this afternoon? Bring any identification you have, and Miss Torres? Her voice carried a weight that made my stomach drop. Don't discuss this with anyone until we've had a chance to speak. I drove to the FBI field office in downtown Phoenix in a daze, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The building looked exactly like what you'd expect from federal law enforcement, all concrete and tinted windows, designed to intimidate. I'd never imagined I'd be walking through those doors, especially not as a victim. Agent Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that meant business. She led me to a small conference room where another agent, Martinez, was already waiting with a laptop and several manila folders spread across the table. Miss Torres, what I'm about to show you might be shocking, Agent Walsh began, opening the first folder. Over the past 18 months, someone using your personal information has applied for and received over $300,000 in credit across 7 different states. She slid the first document across the table. It was a credit application for a platinum card with a $50,000 limit. My name, my social security number, my mother's maiden name. But the address was in Scottsdale, a neighborhood where a studio apartment cost more than I made in 6 months. The signature looked like mine, but something about the loops in the letters seemed off. This was approved 4 months ago. The applicant listed their income as $200,000 annually and claimed to be a real estate consultant. Agent Walsh's eyes never left my face. Miss Torres, what's your actual annual income? $42,000, I whispered, staring at the application. I'm a registered nurse. I work at Phoenix General. Agent Martinez leaned forward. The person using your identity has been sophisticated. They've used different addresses, different occupations, but always high-income claims. Real estate consultant, marketing director, financial advisor. Someone who understands how credit approval systems work. My chest felt tight. How is this possible? How did they get all my information? That's what we're trying to determine. Family members, romantic partners, close friends, anyone who would have access to your personal documents, birth certificate, social security card, tax returns. Agent Walsh opened another folder. Miss Torres, the spending patterns are interesting. High-end shopping, luxury dining, spa treatments, designer clothing. Does this sound like anyone you know? My sister's face flashed in my mind so suddenly it felt like a physical blow. Cassandra had always lived beyond her means, always had designer handbags I couldn't afford, always seemed to have money for expensive dinners and weekend trips to Los Angeles. When I asked how she managed it on her receptionist salary, she'd laugh and say she was good with money, good at finding deals. But I pushed the thought away. This was insane. Cassandra might be irresponsible with money, but she wasn't a criminal. She was my little sister. Agent Martinez slid another document across the table. This is a business loan application filed in Nevada 6 weeks ago. $50,000 for a consulting company called Torres Marketing Solutions. He paused. The business address is a mailbox rental facility. The application was submitted online, but the identity verification was done at a Las Vegas branch. They have security footage. My hands started shaking. Torres was our last name, my last name. Miss Torres, we need to ask, do you have a twin sister? Someone who looks similar enough to pass for you with proper identification? I have a sister, I said slowly, but she's 3 years younger. We look similar, but not identical. Even as I said it, I remembered how often people mistook us for twins. Cassandra was taller, more polished, but we had the same dark hair, the same brown eyes, the same angular face shape inherited from our father. Agent Walsh opened her laptop and turned it toward me. This is security footage from the Nevada branch where the business loan was approved. The video was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. A woman in professional attire, hair pulled back, speaking confidently to a loan officer. She handed over documents, smiled, laughed at something the officer said. It was Cassandra. The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. That's my sister. That's Cassandra Torres. Miss Torres, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation, Agent Walsh said gently. This isn't just identity theft. The pattern we're seeing suggests ongoing, systematic fraud across state lines. That makes it a federal crime. If your sister is responsible, she's looking at serious federal charges. I stared at the frozen image of Cassandra on the laptop screen. She looked confident, professional, nothing like the scattered receptionist who could never keep a job for more than 6 months. What happens now? We need your cooperation. We'll need you to file a formal complaint, provide us with any personal documents you think she might have had access to, and help us understand how she could have obtained your information. Agent Martinez pulled out a recorder. Miss Torres, when was the last time your sister had access to your personal documents? The memory hit me like a punch to the stomach. 8 months ago, when I'd moved apartments, Cassandra had offered to help. She'd been the one to pack my desk, had insisted on organizing my important papers while I dealt with the movers. I trusted her completely, even given her a key in my new place to help with the transition. She helped me move, I said quietly. She had access to everything. Birth certificate, social security card, tax returns from the previous 3 years. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. She kept the spare key to my apartment, said it was for emergencies. Agent Walsh and Martinez exchanged a look. Miss Torres, we're going to need that key back, and we'll need to know everywhere she might have used your credit. Stores, restaurants, any purchases you might have become aware of. Over the next 3 hours, they walked me through what they'd discovered. Credit cards maxed out and abandoned, store financing for furniture and electronics that were never delivered to my address. A lease application for a luxury apartment in Beverly Hills that was declined only because my actual credit report showed too many recent inquiries. The sophisticated part, Agent Martinez explained, is that she never used any of these accounts long enough to trigger individual bank investigations. She'd max out a card, then disappear, apply for new credit elsewhere. The pattern only became visible when our algorithm started tracking cross-state activity. My sister had turned my life into a federal crime spree, and I'd had no idea. What we need to understand, Agent Walsh said, is whether you've noticed any changes in her lifestyle. New car, expensive clothing, frequent travel. I thought about the last family gathering 3 weeks ago. Cassandra had arrived in a BMW I'd never seen before, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my rent. When our cousin asked about the car, she'd said it was a lease, that her new job came with benefits. When my mother complimented the dress, Cassandra had laughed and said she'd gotten it on sale. She's been living way above her means, I admitted. New car, expensive clothes, always eating at high-end restaurants. But she said she got a promotion, that she was making more money. What's her actual job? She works reception at a dental office. Or she did. She's been between jobs a lot lately. The reality was hitting me in waves. Cassandra hadn't gotten a promotion. She'd gotten access to my identity and decided to live the life she thought she deserved. Agent Walsh closed the folders. Miss Torres, we're going to move forward with this investigation. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement, but given the interstate nature of the fraud, this remains primarily a federal case. Your sister is looking at charges of identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. If convicted, she could face significant prison time. How significant? 20 years or more. I drove home in a daze, the agent's business card burning a hole in my purse. 20 years. My sister could go to prison for 20 years because she'd decided my name was worth $300,000 in fraudulent credit. But the worst part wasn't the money or even the legal implications. The worst part was the betrayal. For 8 months, while I'd been working double shifts and eating ramen to make rent, Cassandra had been living a luxury lifestyle funded by my identity. Every family dinner where she'd seemed so successful, so put together, had been built on a lie that used my name. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment staring at my phone. Should I call her? Confront her? The FBI had told me not to discuss the investigation, but Cassandra was still my sister. Part of me wanted to give her a chance to explain, to make this right somehow. Instead, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never thought to do before. I checked my credit report. The screen filled with accounts I'd never opened: credit cards, store financing, personal loans. My credit score had plummeted from excellent to barely acceptable. Months of hard inquiries and maxed-out accounts had destroyed the financial reputation I'd spent years building. But it was the addresses that made me sick. The fraudulent accounts listed addresses in Scottsdale, Beverly Hills, Las Vegas, Miami. Cassandra hadn't just stolen my identity. She'd used it to create an entirely different life, one where she could afford luxury apartments and designer shopping sprees. I found her Instagram account, something I rarely checked. The photos from the past 8 months told the story the FBI had uncovered. Cassandra at expensive restaurants, showing off designer handbags, posing by the BMW in front of a high-rise apartment building. The captions talked about her success, her hard work paying off, her gratitude for the opportunities life had given her. Every opportunity had been stolen from me. The comments were worse. Friends and acquaintances congratulating her on her success, asking for career advice, praising her for living her best life. Even our mother had commented on several photos, telling Cassandra how proud she was of her success. I screenshotted everything. The FBI would want to see it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Cassandra had borrowed money from me, small amounts she'd never paid back. $20 for gas, $50 for groceries, once $100 for a security deposit she claimed her landlord required. I'd always said yes because she was my sister, because family helped family. Now I understood. She hadn't needed the money. She'd been testing me, seeing how easily I'd give her access to my resources. The small amounts had been practice for the big theft. 3 days later, Agent Walsh called. "Miss Torres, we've arrested your sister. She's being held pending arraignment on federal charges. We executed a search warrant on her apartment and recovered significant evidence. Designer goods purchased with your credit, forged documents, even a notebook with your personal information written out in her handwriting." I should have felt relief or vindication or something. Instead, I felt empty. What happens now? The case moves forward. Your sister will have the opportunity to plea bargain, but given the scope of the fraud and the interstate nature, the prosecutors aren't inclined to be lenient. Miss Torres, you should know that your family has been calling our office. They're asking for information about the case. My stomach dropped. What kind of information? They want to know if you're pressing charges, if there's a way to resolve this privately. We've explained that this is a federal investigation and that private resolution isn't an option at this point. After Agent Walsh hung up, I turned off my phone. Within hours, my family would know Cassandra had been arrested. They'd know I was cooperating with the investigation. And they'd expect me to fix it somehow, to make this go away for the sake of family unity. But I was done fixing things for people who saw me as disposable. The first call came from my mother 2 hours later. I let it go to voicemail, then my father, then my aunt, my cousin, even Cassandra's best friend from high school. By evening, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails I didn't want to hear. Finally, I listened to one. My mother's voice, strained and tearful. "Vivian, honey, you need to call me back immediately. There's been some kind of mistake. Cassandra's in jail, and they're saying you reported her for identity theft. This has to be wrong. You need to fix this. She's your sister. Call me back." Fix this?
as if Cassandra's federal crimes were something I'd caused, something I was responsible for resolving. I called Agent Walsh instead. "Miss Torres, are you all right? We've had several calls from your family members today. They want me to make this go away. They think I can just withdraw my complaint and everything will be fine. You should know that even if you wanted to, this case is beyond that now. The federal government is pursuing charges based on the evidence we've gathered. Your cooperation is helpful, but the case doesn't depend entirely on your testimony." That should have been reassuring, but instead it felt isolating. Even if I wanted to help Cassandra, I couldn't. The FBI had built their case, and my sister's fate was out of my hands. The next morning, I finally answered when my mother called. "Vivian, thank God, I've been worried sick."
What is this nonsense about Cassandra stealing your identity? It's not nonsense, Mom. She used my personal information to get $300,000 in credit. The FBI has security footage, forged documents, everything. That's impossible. Cassandra wouldn't do that. She did do that. For 8 months, she's been living a luxury lifestyle using my name and credit. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Well, maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she thought you'd given her permission. Permission to commit federal fraud? Don't be dramatic, Vivian. You know how confused Cassandra gets about money. She probably thought she was helping somehow, or that she'd pay it back before you noticed. The casual dismissal of federal crimes as confusion about money made my chest tight with anger. Mom, she could go to prison for 20 years. Which is why you need to tell the FBI this was all a mistake. Tell them you gave her permission. Tell them you're family and you work these things out privately. I can't tell them that because it isn't true. Vivian Marie Torres, that is your sister, in jail, your blood. You will not abandon family for money. I'm not abandoning family for money. I'm refusing to lie to federal agents to cover up her crimes. The line went quiet. Then my mother's voice, cold and disappointed. I didn't raise you to be so selfish. You raised me to tell the truth. I raised you to protect your family. She should have thought about that before she decided to steal my identity. My mother hung up. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with texts from relatives. My aunt, "Your sister needs you right now." My cousin, "Family forgives family." My father, "We need to talk about this situation with Cassandra." Every message carried the same underlying assumption that I was responsible for fixing this, for making Cassandra's consequences disappear, for prioritizing family loyalty over justice. None of them asked how I was doing. None of them acknowledged that I was the victim of a federal crime. None of them seemed to care that my credit was destroyed, my financial future compromised, my sense of security shattered. They only cared that their golden daughter was facing the consequences of her choices. That afternoon, Agent Walsh called with an update. "Miss Torres, your sister's attorney has requested a meeting. He wants to discuss a possible plea agreement." "What kind of plea agreement?" "Probably reduced charges in exchange for cooperation and restitution. Your sister would admit to the fraud and agree to pay back what she stole, but she'd avoid the maximum sentence." "What would I have to do?" "Nothing unless you choose to. The prosecutor might ask for a victim impact statement, but that would be entirely up to you." "How much restitution are we talking about?" "Based on what we've recovered, probably around $200,000 after accounting for payments already made and items we can't recover." $200,000? More than I made in 5 years. Does she have that kind of money? No. The luxury items we recovered have significant value, but she'd likely be paying restitution for years, possibly decades. That evening, Cassandra's attorney called me directly. His voice was smooth, professional, designed to inspire confidence. "Miss Torres, I'm Robert Chen, representing your sister Cassandra. I'm hoping we can find a way to resolve this situation that works for everyone involved." "What kind of resolution?" "Cassandra is prepared to accept responsibility for her mistakes and make full restitution. She's also willing to seek counseling for what we believe are underlying issues with impulse control and financial management." Mistakes? Impulse control issues? As if systematic federal fraud was like buying too many shoes on a credit card.
Mr. Chen, your client didn't make mistakes. She committed federal crimes for 8 months. I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be. But sending your sister to federal prison won't get your money back or repair your credit. A plea agreement with supervised restitution would accomplish both those goals while keeping your family together. Mr. Chen, my family stopped being together the moment your client decided to steal my identity. Miss Torres, I've spoken with your parents. They're hoping you'll consider what's best for everyone involved. They're hoping I'll consider what's best for Cassandra. What's best for me is justice. Justice and mercy don't have to be mutually exclusive. They do when the person asking for mercy spent 8 months systematically destroying my financial life. Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Would you be willing to meet with your sister to hear her side of the story? No. Miss Torres, no. I'm done listening to her stories. I'm done being manipulated into fixing her problems. Tell your client that if she wants mercy, she should have thought about that before she forged my signature for the 100th time. I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in days: power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I'd said no to someone trying to manipulate me into protecting Cassandra from her own choices. 2 days later, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door, but he kept knocking, calling my name through the thin walls. Dad, you can't just show up here. You won't answer your phone. Your mother is beside herself with worry. About me or about Cassandra? About both of you. Vivian, you're tearing this family apart. I didn't tear anything apart. Cassandra committed federal fraud using my identity. The FBI tore it apart when they arrested her. My father pushed past me into the apartment, looking around at my tiny studio with barely concealed disdain. Look at this place. You're living like a college student while your sister rots in jail. My sister is in jail because she chose to steal my identity rather than live within her means. She made a mistake. She made hundreds of mistakes. Every fraudulent application, every forged signature, every lie to a bank officer. Those were choices, not mistakes. My father sat heavily on my small couch, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. Vivian, I need you to understand something. Your sister has always struggled. Since she was little, she's had problems with impulse control, with understanding consequences. That's not my problem. She's your sister. That makes it your problem. No, Dad.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
It makes it your problem. You and Mom enabled this behavior for years. You covered for her when she got fired from jobs. You paid her rent when she couldn't afford it. You made excuses every time she did something irresponsible. And now you want me to enable it too? We want you to show compassion. Where was her compassion when she was destroying my credit? Where was her consideration for my financial future when she was maxing out credit cards in my name? My father was quiet for a long moment. The attorney says she could get 20 years. The attorney is right. You could stop this. No, I couldn't. This is a federal case now. My cooperation helps, but the government has enough evidence to prosecute with or without me. But you could speak for her. You could ask for leniency. Why would I do that? Because she's your sister. Because she's my sister, she should have never stolen from me in the first place. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. I don't understand how you became so cold. Your mother and I raised you better than this. You raised me to be responsible, to work hard, to earn what I have. You raised me to tell the truth and face consequences for my actions. I'm doing exactly what you raised me to do. You're destroying your family. My family destroyed itself when you all decided that protecting Cassandra was more important than holding her accountable. After he left, I sat in my apartment feeling simultaneously drained and liberated. For weeks, I'd been carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations, their demands that I prioritize family loyalty over justice. But saying no, setting boundaries, refusing to enable my sister's behavior felt like breathing for the first time in months. That weekend, the local news picked up the story, not with my name, but with enough details that anyone who knew our family would recognize the situation.
Local woman arrested in multi-state identity theft scheme ran on Saturday Evening News, complete with footage of Cassandra being led from her apartment in handcuffs. My phone buzzed with texts from old friends and coworkers who'd seen the story. Most were supportive, expressing shock and asking if I was okay. But a few carried undertones of judgment, questioning why I'd involved federal law enforcement instead of handling things privately. The worst text came from an old college roommate. Saw the news about your sister. Wow. I mean, I get that you're angry, but sending your own family to federal prison seems extreme. Couldn't you guys have worked this out? I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. She didn't work it out when she committed federal fraud. Why should I work it out when she faces federal consequences? Monday morning brought another call from Agent Walsh. Miss Torres, the prosecutor would like to meet with you this week. Your sister's attorney has formally submitted a plea proposal, and they want to discuss your input on sentencing recommendations. What kind of input? Whether you support leniency, what impact this has had on your life, whether you believe your sister is likely to reoffend. Your voice matters in this process. When do they need to know? The meeting is Thursday afternoon. Miss Torres, you should know that your sister has requested to see you. She's asking for a chance to apologize in person. My first instinct was to refuse immediately. But something about Agent Walsh's tone made me pause. What do you think I should do? That's entirely your decision. Some victims find closure in hearing the perpetrator acknowledge responsibility. Others find it re-traumatizing. What matters is what you need for your own healing process. What did I need? For weeks, I'd been so focused on what everyone else wanted. My parents wanted me to protect Cassandra, her attorney wanted me to show mercy, the FBI wanted my cooperation. But what did I actually need? Can I think about it? Of course. If you decide you want to meet with her, we can arrange it at the federal facility. It would be supervised, recorded, and you could end the meeting at any time. That night, I made a list of everything Cassandra had stolen from me. Not just the money, though that was substantial. Not just the credit damage, though that would take years to repair. She'd stolen my sense of security, my ability to trust, my relationship with my family. She'd stolen 8 months of my life, during which I'd worked myself to exhaustion while she lived in luxury on my dime. But she'd also given me something unexpected: clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I understood exactly where I stood with my family. I wasn't the daughter they protected. I was the daughter they expected to sacrifice herself for the one they actually valued. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. I could stop trying to earn their approval, stop contorting myself to fit their expectations. I could prioritize my own well-being without guilt. Thursday arrived gray and drizzly, fitting weather for a meeting that would determine my sister's fate. The prosecutor's office was downtown, a glass building that reflected the stormy sky. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Liu was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with a direct manner that I found reassuring. Miss Torres, thank you for coming. I want to discuss your sister's plea proposal and get your perspective on appropriate sentencing. What exactly is she pleading to? Identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. The plea agreement calls for 48 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She'd also pay full restitution, approximately $200,000. 4 years. It seemed like a long time and no time at all simultaneously. What would happen if she went to trial? If convicted on all charges, she'd likely face 12 to 20 years. The plea agreement is a significant reduction in exchange for accepting responsibility and saving the government the cost of a trial. What do you need from me? Your perspective on whether you believe this sentence is appropriate, whether you think your sister is likely to reoffend, whether you want to submit a victim impact statement. I thought about Cassandra's Instagram posts, her casual display of luxury items purchased with my stolen identity. I thought about her attorney's description of impulse control issues and financial management problems. I thought about my parents' insistence that I protect her from consequences. She's not going to change, I said finally. Not if people keep protecting her from the results of her choices. For 26 years, my parents have been making excuses for her behavior, bailing her out of problems, enabling her to avoid responsibility. This is the first time she's faced real consequences for her actions. So you support the plea agreement? I support whatever sentence will prevent her from doing this to someone else. If that's 4 years, fine. If it should be longer, I trust your judgment. Attorney Liu nodded. Would you like to submit a victim impact statement? It's an opportunity to explain how this crime has affected your life. Yes, I want the judge to understand that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was 8 months of systematic fraud that destroyed my financial stability and shattered my family relationships. Miss Torres, have you decided about meeting with your sister? I'd been dreading that question all week. Part of me wanted answers. Why had she chosen me as her victim? Had she ever considered the consequences? Did she understand what she'd done to my life? But another part of me recognized that nothing she could say would change anything. Her explanations wouldn't repair my credit or restore my family relationships.
Her apologies wouldn't undo 8 months of fraud. No, I don't want to see her. That's perfectly understandable. Many victims choose not to meet with the perpetrator. I spent my whole life listening to her explanations, believing her promises to change, accepting her apologies for behavior that kept getting worse. I'm done with that cycle. Attorney Liu smiled slightly. Miss Torres, if you don't mind me saying, you seem remarkably clear-headed about this situation. Many family members struggle with conflicting loyalties in cases like this. My loyalties aren't conflicted. They're with the person whose identity was stolen and whose life was disrupted. That person happens to be me. Walking out of the prosecutor's office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I'd made my position clear. I supported consequences proportional to the crime, and I had no interest in enabling further manipulation or avoiding accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Cassandra's attorney says you refuse to meet with her. She's heartbroken. How can you be so cruel? I turned off my phone without responding. Cruelty was stealing someone's identity for 8 months. Cruelty was destroying their credit while living in luxury. Cruelty was expecting the victim to prioritize the perpetrator's feelings. Setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I made plans that had nothing to do with this case. I met friends for brunch, went to a movie, took a long walk through the botanical gardens. For the first time since Agent Walsh's phone call, I remembered what it felt like to think about something other than my sister's crimes and my family's manipulation. Sunday evening, my cousin called. Maria had always been the family mediator, the one who smoothed over conflicts and encouraged forgiveness. Vivian, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I'm worried about what this is doing to the whole family. What it's doing to the family? Everyone's taking sides. Your parents are devastated. Your aunt and uncle don't know what to say. The cousins are arguing about whether you're doing the right thing. Maria, do you understand what Cassandra did? She made some bad choices with money. She committed federal fraud. For 8 months, she could have destroyed my entire financial future. But she didn't mean to hurt you. Intent doesn't matter when someone systematically steals your identity. Results matter. Consequences matter. I know, but she's family. Family forgives. Family also doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't manipulate and lie and commit federal crimes using each other's identities. Maria was quiet for a moment. What would it take for you to forgive her? I don't know if I can, but even if I could, forgiveness doesn't mean avoiding consequences. She can serve her sentence and pay restitution, and maybe, eventually, prove that she's changed. But that's her work to do, not mine. Your parents think you've changed. They say you've become hard. I've become clear about boundaries. Maybe that looks hard to people who are used to me accommodating everyone else's needs. We all just want the family to heal. The family will heal when it stops protecting people from the consequences of their choices. After Maria hung up, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. For weeks, I'd been carrying rage about Cassandra's betrayal, my family's manipulation, the destruction of my financial stability. But somewhere in the process of setting boundaries and refusing to enable bad behavior, the anger had transformed into something else. Clarity, determination, peace with my decisions. I was no longer the family member who absorbed everyone else's problems. I was no longer the daughter who sacrificed herself to maintain family harmony. I was a woman who understood her worth and protected her boundaries. 3 weeks later, the plea hearing took place.
I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom as Cassandra stood before the federal judge and formally admitted to identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. She looked smaller than I remembered, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of designer clothes, her hair pulled back without the expensive styling I'd become accustomed to seeing in her social media posts. When the judge asked if she understood the charges, her voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." When asked if she committed these crimes, she paused for a long moment before answering. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge accepted the plea agreement: 48 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and full restitution of $212,000. Cassandra would serve approximately 4 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. As the hearing concluded, Cassandra's eyes found mine across the courtroom. For a moment, we looked at each other directly, the first time since this nightmare began. I saw shame in her expression, and regret, and something that might have been an apology. I didn't smile, I didn't nod, I didn't offer any gesture of forgiveness or reconciliation. I simply looked back until she turned away. Outside the courthouse, my parents waited by their car. They looked older than I remembered, worn down by weeks of stress and family conflict. My mother's eyes were red from crying. "Vivian," my father called as I walked toward my own car. I stopped but didn't approach them. "Are you satisfied now?" my mother asked, her voice thick with accusation. "I'm satisfied that justice was served." 4 years in federal prison, 4 years of her life gone. 8 months of fraud, 8 months of stealing my identity and destroying my credit. She chose her consequences when she chose her actions. My father stepped forward. "What happens now? To us, I mean, to our family." "I don't know, Dad. That depends on whether you can accept that I made the right choice." "The right choice?" My mother's voice rose. "The right choice was to handle this privately, to protect your sister, to keep our family together. The right choice was to hold her accountable for federal crimes. The right choice was to refuse to enable criminal behavior. The right choice was to prioritize justice over family manipulation." "So that's it?" my father asked. "You're willing to lose your entire family over this?" I looked at them both, these people who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, who were now asking me to abandon those principles for the sake of protecting someone who had betrayed me completely. I'm not willing to lose my integrity. If that costs me my family, then maybe this family isn't worth keeping. I walked away from them, got in my car, and drove home to my studio apartment. For the first time in months, the space felt peaceful rather than cramped. It was small, but it was mine. Paid for with money I'd earned, furnished with items I'd chosen, decorated with memories that belonged to me alone.
That evening, I wrote the victim impact statement I'd promised Attorney Lou. It wasn't angry or vengeful. It was honest. I described the financial damage, the emotional betrayal, the destruction of family relationships. I explained how my sister's choices had affected every aspect of my life, from my credit score to my ability to trust people I loved. But I also wrote about the unexpected gifts that had emerged from this nightmare: clarity about my worth, strength to set boundaries, freedom from toxic family dynamics that had been draining me for years. The defendant didn't just steal my identity, I concluded. She forced me to reclaim it. 6 months later, I received the first restitution payment, $47.53. At this rate, it would take Cassandra approximately 90 years to pay back what she'd stolen. But the money wasn't really the point anymore. The point was that she was facing consequences. The point was that I'd refused to enable her behavior. The point was that I'd chosen my own well-being over family pressure. My credit score was slowly improving. I'd found a new apartment, slightly larger, in a neighborhood where I felt safe. I'd started dating someone who knew my entire story and admired how I'd handled it. My family had largely stopped calling. Occasionally, I'd get a text from Maria or my aunt, usually around holidays, testing whether I was ready to reconcile. I always responded politely but firmly. I was open to relationships built on mutual respect and accountability, but I was no longer available for manipulation or enabling. Most of them stopped trying after a few months. But that was okay. I'd learned that family isn't just about blood.
It's about people who support you, who celebrate your boundaries rather than trying to bulldoze them, who understand that love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. I found my family among friends who understood my decisions, colleagues who respected my integrity, and new relationships built on honesty rather than obligation. Cassandra still had 3.5 years left on her sentence. I didn't know if she'd changed, if she'd learned anything, if she understood the full scope of what she'd done. Maybe she had, maybe she hadn't, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility was to the woman whose identity had been stolen and who had fought to reclaim it. My responsibility was to live authentically, set healthy boundaries, and build relationships based on mutual respect. My responsibility was to myself. And for the first time in my adult life, I was fulfilling that responsibility completely. 3 days after the plea hearing, I received a letter from Cassandra, federal prison mail, my name written in her familiar handwriting across a manila envelope that felt thin and desperate. I held it for several minutes, weighing whether opening it would undo the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. The letter was 4 pages long, covered in her careful script. She apologized repeatedly, explained that she'd been struggling with depression and financial anxiety, insisted that she'd always planned to pay me back before I noticed. She described the federal detention center, the fear she felt every night, the way other inmates treated white-collar criminals. She begged me to visit, to give her a chance to explain in person, to help her understand how to make this right. The last paragraph made my chest tight with familiar manipulation. I know you're angry, Viv, and I deserve that. But I'm still your little sister. I'm still the girl who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms. I'm still the person who believed you when you told me I could be anything I wanted to be. I made terrible choices, but I'm not a terrible person. Please don't give up on me completely. I read the letter twice, then fed it through my paper shredder. Every word was designed to trigger my protective instincts, to remind me of childhood bonds that predated her criminal behavior. But I'd learned to recognize emotional manipulation, and I refused to be drawn back into the cycle of enabling her choices while absorbing the consequences. 2 hours later, my phone rang, Cassandra's attorney. Miss Torres, I know you've decided not to visit your sister, but I'm hoping you'll reconsider. She's struggling significantly with the transition to federal custody. Mr. Chen, that's not my problem. She's developed severe anxiety, hasn't been eating regularly. The prison medical staff is concerned about her mental state. She should have considered her mental state before committing federal fraud for 8 months. Miss Torres, I understand you're hurt, but your sister is genuinely remorseful. She's enrolled in financial counseling and therapy programs. She's working to understand why she made these choices. Good, that's what she should be doing. A visit from you could provide tremendous motivation for her rehabilitation. Mr. Chen, my sister spent 8 months stealing my identity and destroying my credit while I worked 60-hour weeks to make ends meet. She lived in luxury while I ate ramen and worried about rent. She manipulated my family into believing she'd achieved success through hard work when every achievement was built on fraud. Why would I provide motivation for her rehabilitation? Because rehabilitation serves everyone's interests. A sister who successfully completes her sentence and reintegrates into society is less likely to reoffend. A sister who faces the full consequences of her choices without family members rescuing her is also less likely to reoffend. Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Miss Torres, the restitution payments are going to be challenging on a prison salary. Cassandra will earn approximately $12 per month. At that rate, repayment will take several decades. That's mathematics, not manipulation. I'm simply suggesting that family support during her incarceration could improve her post-release employment prospects, which would benefit your restitution recovery. Mr. Chen, my sister spent 8 months stealing my identity and destroying my credit while I worked 60-hour weeks to make ends meet. She lived in luxury while I ate ramen and worried about rent. She manipulated my family into believing she'd achieved success through hard work when every achievement was built on fraud. Why would I provide motivation for her rehabilitation? Because rehabilitation serves everyone's interests. A sister who successfully completes her sentence and reintegrates into society is less likely to reoffend. A sister who faces the full consequences of her choices without family members rescuing her is also less likely to reoffend. Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Miss Torres, the restitution payments are going to be challenging on a prison salary. Cassandra will earn approximately $12 per month. At that rate, repayment will take several decades. That's mathematics, not manipulation. I'm simply suggesting that family support during her incarceration could improve her post-release employment prospects, which would benefit your restitution recovery. Mr. Chen, are you seriously suggesting that I should emotionally support the person who stole my identity so that she can get better jobs and pay me back faster? I'm suggesting that pragmatic forgiveness serves practical purposes. Here's some pragmatic advice. Tell your client that the fastest way to improve her post-release prospects is to use her incarceration time productively. Get education credentials, develop job skills, complete therapy programs. None of that requires visits from the sister she victimized. After I hung up, I realized how far I'd come in setting boundaries. 6 months ago, Mr. Chen's appeals to family loyalty and practical concerns might have swayed me. Now, I could see the manipulation clearly and respond from a position of strength rather than guilt. That evening, my neighbor knocked on my door. Mrs. Rodriguez was in her 70s, a retired teacher who'd lived in the building for 20 years. She'd become something of a surrogate grandmother since my family had essentially disowned me. "Mija, you have visitors downstairs. They say they're family." My stomach clenched. What do they look like? Older couple, well-dressed. The woman has been crying. My parents. They'd driven across town to ambush me at home since I'd stopped answering their calls. "Mrs. Rodriguez, could you tell them I'm not available, that I've gone out for the evening?" She studied my face with kind eyes. "These are the people who want you to forgive the sister who stole from you?" I'd told Mrs. Rodriguez the basic story weeks ago when she'd asked why I seemed so stressed. Her response had been immediate and clear. Family who steals from you isn't family anymore. Yes, those people. I'll tell them you moved, that I don't have forwarding information. 15 minutes later, she knocked again. They're gone, but they left this. She handed me an envelope with my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph.
The photo was from my college graduation, all of us smiling in front of the university sign. My parents looked proud, Cassandra looked excited for the party afterward, and I looked hopeful about the future I was building through education and hard work. The note was brief. "We raised you better than this. Come home and fix your family." I stared at the photo for a long time, remembering that day. I'd graduated summa cum laude with my nursing degree, the first person in our family to finish college. My parents had thrown a celebration dinner, invited all the relatives, given speeches about how proud they were of my accomplishments. But I also remembered what happened 2 months later, when Cassandra had borrowed my car and returned it with a dented bumper and an empty gas tank. When I'd asked her to pay for the repairs, my parents had intervened. "She's young, Vivian. She'll learn responsibility gradually. Family helps family." The pattern had been there all along. My achievements were celebrated, but my boundaries were dismissed. Cassandra's failures were minimized, but my standards were criticized as unrealistic. I put the photo in my desk drawer and threw away the note. The next morning brought unexpected complications at work. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office with an expression I couldn't read. "Vivian, we need to discuss something sensitive. HR received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your sister." My pulse quickened. "What kind of call?" She said there had been a misunderstanding about identity theft charges, that you were struggling with mental health issues and making false accusations against family members. She suggested that we might want to evaluate your fitness for duty. "Janet, my sister is currently serving a federal sentence for identity theft. She pled guilty 3 weeks ago." I figured something like that was the case. But I need to ask directly, is there anything about your current situation that could affect your ability to perform your job duties? Absolutely not. I've been handling this situation professionally while maintaining my full work schedule. That's what I thought. Your performance has been excellent throughout this entire period. But HR wants documentation that we've addressed the call appropriately. What kind of documentation? A written statement from you, explaining the situation, and confirmation that you're receiving appropriate support. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. The idea that Cassandra was trying to sabotage my career from federal prison made my hands shake with rage. She'd already stolen my identity, destroyed my credit, and fractured my family relationships. Now she was attempting to undermine my professional reputation. Janet, I'll provide whatever documentation you need, but I want it on record that my sister is trying to manipulate my employment as retaliation for cooperating with federal law enforcement. Understood. And Vivian, for what it's worth, I think you've handled this situation with remarkable strength. Not everyone could maintain professional standards while dealing with family betrayal and federal criminal proceedings. That afternoon, I called Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. I'd been considering counseling for weeks, but Cassandra's attempt to sabotage my career pushed me to make the appointment immediately. Dr. Chen's office was warm and comfortable, designed to put people at ease. She was probably in her 40s, with a calm presence that inspired confidence. Vivian, tell me what brought you here today. I explained the identity theft, the federal investigation, my family's reaction, and the morning's workplace incident. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes. It sounds like you've been dealing with multiple forms of abuse, she said when I finished. Financial abuse from your sister, emotional manipulation from your family, and now workplace harassment. Is that what this is? Abuse? Financial abuse occurs when someone uses another person's financial resources without permission, often through deception or manipulation. Your sister engaged in systematic financial abuse for 8 months. But she's my sister. Abusers are often family members. The relationship doesn't excuse the behavior. My parents think I'm being cruel by not visiting her in prison. Your parents are asking you to provide emotional support to someone who victimized you. That's not reasonable, and it's not healthy. They say family forgives. Forgiveness doesn't require putting yourself in harmful situations. Forgiveness doesn't mean avoiding consequences or enabling future bad behavior. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Vivian, you've made decisions based on protecting yourself and holding your sister accountable. Those are healthy choices. The people criticizing those choices are prioritizing the comfort of the person who caused harm over the well-being of the person who was harmed. So I'm not crazy for refusing to visit her? You're not crazy for setting boundaries with someone who victimized you. You're not cruel for declining criminal behavior. You're not selfish for prioritizing your own healing. I left Dr. Chen's office with something I hadn't felt in months: validation. A professional had confirmed that my choices were reasonable, that my boundaries were healthy, that my family's expectations were unrealistic. 2 days later, I received another letter from federal prison. This one wasn't from Cassandra. The envelope was addressed in unfamiliar handwriting, but the return address was the same federal facility. Inside was a single page from someone named Jennifer Walsh. Dear Miss Torres, my cellmate Cassandra Torres has told me about your situation. I understand that family conflicts can be complicated, but I want you to know that your sister is struggling significantly. She cries every night, barely eats, and talks constantly about how much she misses her family. As someone who has made similar mistakes and lost family support, I wanted to reach out and encourage you to consider reconciliation. Prison is hard enough without feeling abandoned by loved ones. Your sister needs to know that her family still cares about her. Please consider visiting or at least writing. Family forgiveness can be powerful motivation for rehabilitation. I read the letter twice, then called Agent Walsh immediately. Miss Torres, what can I help you with? I received a letter from someone claiming to be my sister's cellmate, encouraging me to visit her in prison. Is this normal? It's not unheard of, but it's concerning. Your sister shouldn't be sharing details of her case or your personal information with other inmates. Can she do that legally? She can discuss her situation, but encouraging others to contact you could be considered harassment, especially if it's part of a pattern of manipulation. What should I do? Forward the letter to me. I'll contact the prison administration. If your sister is orchestrating contact from other inmates, that could affect her housing assignment and privileges. Agent Walsh, she also called my workplace to suggest I was mentally unstable and making false accusations. That's more serious. Attempting to damage your professional reputation could be considered witness intimidation or retaliation. What does that mean? It could result in additional charges. Federal prisoners aren't allowed to harass or intimidate the victims of their crimes. 3 hours later, Agent Walsh called back.
Miss Torres, I spoke with the prison administration. Your sister has been moved to restricted housing pending investigation of the cellmate litter. They're also monitoring her phone calls more closely. Is she in trouble? She's being evaluated for potential disciplinary action. The prison takes inmate harassment of victims seriously. Good. Miss Torres, I want you to understand that this behavior pattern isn't unusual for financial criminals.
When direct appeals don't work, they often try indirect manipulation through third parties. You mean this isn't going to stop? It might escalate before it stops. Family members, mutual friends, even professionals like her attorney might increase pressure on you. People who commit financial crimes often have well-developed manipulation skills. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, an older woman's voice asked for me by name. "This is Sister Catherine from St. Mary's Catholic Church. I understand you have a sister in federal prison." "How did you get this number?" "Your mother is a parishioner. She's asked our prayer group to reach out and encourage family reconciliation." "Sister Catherine, with respect, this is a private family matter." "Child, I understand you're hurt by your sister's choices, but forgiveness is a cornerstone of our faith. Your sister needs to know that God's love and family love can coexist with accountability." "Sister Catherine, my sister stole my identity and committed federal fraud. She's serving an appropriate sentence for her crimes." "I'm not questioning the legal consequences. I'm encouraging you to visit her, to show that family bonds survive even serious mistakes." "These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate criminal choices made repeatedly over 8 months." "But she's still your sister." "She was my sister when she decided to forge my signature on fraudulent loan applications." "Vivian, your mother is suffering deeply. She feels like she's lost both daughters." "She has one daughter in federal prison for committing crimes, and another daughter who refused to enable those crimes. If she's lost anyone, it's because she chose to prioritize the criminal over the victim." Sister Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I'll pray for your family's healing." "Thank you, but pray for my sister's accountability and my mother's acceptance of reality." After I hung up, I felt exhausted. The constant pressure from every direction, family, attorneys, prison inmates, religious figures, was wearing me down. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do, but no one seemed to care about what was best for my own well-being. I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an emergency appointment. "Vivian, you look overwhelmed." "Everyone wants me to visit my sister in prison. My parents, her attorney, her cellmate, now my mother's priest. I'm starting to wonder if I'm the crazy one." "Tell me what you're feeling when people pressure you to visit." "Guilt, like maybe I am being cruel, like maybe family loyalty should override everything else." "And what do you feel when you imagine actually visiting her?" "Anxiety, anger, like I'd be walking back into a trap." Those feelings are important information. Your gut instincts are telling you that visiting would be harmful to your healing process. "But what if everyone else is right? What if I'm being too rigid?" "Vivian, let me ask you something. If a stranger had stolen your identity and committed the same crimes, would anyone expect you to visit them in prison? Of course not. The fact that your sister shares your DNA doesn't change the fact that she victimized you. Biology doesn't create an obligation to expose yourself to further manipulation. My mother says family is forever. Healthy family relationships are based on mutual respect, honesty, and consideration for each other's well-being. Your sister violated all of those principles. Your mother is asking you to pretend that violation didn't happen. So what do I do about all the pressure? You keep setting boundaries. You keep prioritizing your own healing. You trust your instincts about what feels safe and healthy. What if my family never forgives me for this choice? What if they don't? Would you rather have their approval or your integrity? The question hit me like a physical blow. For weeks, I'd been assuming that eventually my family would understand my position, that eventually they'd accept my boundaries and we'd find a way to reconcile. But what if they didn't? What if they chose Cassandra permanently? I'd rather have my integrity. Then you have your answer.
That weekend, I received a call from Maria, my cousin and the family's designated peacekeeper. Vivian, I need to tell you something. Your parents are organizing a family meeting for next Sunday. They want everyone to discuss the situation with Cassandra and figure out how to move forward. Are they expecting me to attend? They're hoping you will. They think if enough family members express their opinions, you might reconsider your position. Maria, they're planning an intervention to pressure me into visiting a federal prison. They're planning a family discussion about healing and reconciliation. Those are fancy words for emotional manipulation. Vivian, everyone is worried about you. You've cut yourself off from the family, you won't talk to anyone about what happened, you're refusing to show basic compassion to your sister. I've cut myself off from family members who are pressuring me to enable criminal behavior. I've talked extensively to professionals about what happened, and I'm showing appropriate compassion by allowing natural consequences to occur. You're being stubborn. I'm being healthy. Will you at least come to the meeting, hear what everyone has to say? No, I won't subject myself to a group manipulation session designed to break down my boundaries. So you're just going to abandon your entire family? I'm going to prioritize relationships that respect my decisions and support my well-being. Maria was quiet for a long moment. I don't understand what happened to you, Vivian. You used to be so caring, so willing to put family first. I used to be willing to sacrifice myself to keep everyone else comfortable. I've learned that's not caring, it's enabling. Your mother is heartbroken. My mother is heartbroken because the family dynamic she's comfortable with requires me to absorb the consequences of other people's bad choices. I'm no longer willing to do that. After Maria hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling something unexpected. Relief. For the first time, I'd articulated clearly why I was making these choices. Not because I didn't love my family, but because I'd learned to love myself enough to protect my own well-being. Sunday came and went without contact from anyone. I spent the day reading, cooking, and taking a long walk through the park. My phone stayed quiet, and I imagined my family gathered around my parents' dining table, discussing my selfishness and stubbornness, trying to develop strategies for bringing me back into line. Monday morning, my mother called. Vivian, we had our family meeting yesterday. I figured. Everyone agrees that you're making a mistake. Everyone thinks you should visit your sister and work toward reconciliation. Everyone except me. You're one person. We're 12 people who all love you and want what's best for your family. You're 12 people who want me to prioritize Cassandra's comfort over my own well-being.
We're 12 people who understand that family means forgiveness. Mom, did anyone at your meeting talk about what Cassandra did to me? Did anyone discuss the 8 months of fraud, the destroyed credit, the federal charges? We talked about moving forward, not dwelling on the past. The past where your daughter committed federal crimes using my identity. Vivian, we've decided to give you 2 more weeks to think about this. If you don't visit your sister by then, we're going to assume you've chosen to leave the family permanently. The ultimatum hit me like a slap. You're threatening to disown me if I don't visit a federal prison? We're giving you a chance to do the right thing. The right thing is holding criminals accountable for their choices. The right thing is showing compassion to family members who made mistakes. Mom, she didn't make mistakes. She made choices, hundreds of them. Every fraudulent application, every forged signature, every lie to a bank officer. Those were deliberate choices to victimize me. 2 weeks, Vivian. Think about what's really important. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. 2 weeks to choose between my boundaries and my family. 2 weeks to decide whether I valued my integrity or their approval more. I called Dr. Chen immediately. Vivian, you sound upset. My family has given me an ultimatum. Visit my sister in prison within 2 weeks or be permanently cut off from the family. How does that make you feel? Scared, angry, but also relieved? Tell me about the relief. I think I've been waiting for them to make this choice so I don't have to. If they're willing to disown me for setting healthy boundaries, then maybe they're not the family I thought they were. What would it mean to lose their approval permanently?
It would mean I'm truly on my own. No safety net, no family support system, no shared holidays or traditions. And what would it mean to visit your sister? It would mean abandoning everything I've learned about self-respect and boundaries. It would mean rewarding her manipulation and enabling future bad behavior. So you're choosing between family approval and personal integrity? I'm choosing between toxic relationships and healthy boundaries. Vivian, that sounds like you've already made your decision. She was right. The ultimatum had clarified something I'd been avoiding. I could have my family's approval or my self-respect, but not both. That evening, I drafted a letter to my mother. Dear Mom, you've asked me to choose between family loyalty and personal integrity. I choose integrity. You've asked me to prioritize Cassandra's comfort over my own well-being. I choose my well-being. You've asked me to enable criminal behavior for the sake of family harmony. I choose accountability. If these choices mean I'm no longer welcome in this family, then this family is no longer healthy for me. I love you all, but I love myself enough to protect my boundaries. Vivian. I didn't send the letter immediately. Instead, I carried it with me for 3 days, reading it occasionally, making sure it reflected my true feelings. On Thursday, I received another call from Agent Walsh. Miss Torres, I have an update on your sister's disciplinary hearing. What kind of update? She's been found guilty of inmate harassment for orchestrating the cellmate letter. She's lost phone privileges for 30 days and has been moved to administrative segregation. What does that mean? She's in solitary confinement for 22 hours per day, limited interaction with other inmates, restricted recreational activities. Is that serious? It's a significant disciplinary action. It also means she can't orchestrate further contact with you through other inmates. Agent Walsh, my family has given me an ultimatum about visiting her. What kind of ultimatum? Visit within 2 weeks or be cut off permanently. Miss Torres, you should know that prison visits can be emotionally manipulative environments. Inmates often use family visits to continue patterns of control and manipulation. You think visiting would be a mistake? I think you should make whatever choice serves your own healing process. But I want you to understand that your sister is likely to use any contact to continue pressuring you for support, even in a supervised prison visit, especially in a supervised prison visit. The restricted environment often intensifies emotional appeals. That evening, I made my decision. I sent the letter to my mother, then blocked all family phone numbers except Maria's. If they were going to disown me for setting boundaries, I wouldn't make myself available for continued manipulation during the process. 2 days later, Maria called. Vivian, your mother got your letter. She's devastated. I'm sorry she's upset, but I meant every word. The whole family is talking about it. Some people are angry, some are hurt, some think you're having some kind of breakdown. Some people need to accept that I'm making healthy choices for my own well-being. Are you really willing to lose everyone over this? I'm really willing to lose everyone rather than lose myself. What if Cassandra completes her sentence and genuinely changes? What if she gets out of prison and becomes a different person? Then she'll have to prove that change through her actions, not through family pressure and manipulation. And if she does prove it, then maybe we can have a relationship based on honesty and accountability instead of enabling and manipulation. But you'll have missed 4 years of being her sister. I've already missed 8 months of being myself while she stole my identity. I'd rather miss 4 years of enabling her than spend 4 more years losing myself. Maria was quiet for a long moment. I don't agree with your choice, but I understand it. Thank you. I'm not going to stop calling you. I'm not going to choose sides between you and the rest of the family. I appreciate that, Maria. But I also can't promise that everyone else will make the same choice. I understand. The 2-week deadline came and went without any contact from my family. I spent the day hiking in the mountains outside Phoenix, enjoying the solitude and the vast landscape that put everything in perspective. My phone stayed quiet. That evening, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely peaceful. Not happy exactly, but calm, centered, clear about who I was and what I valued. I'd lost my family, but I'd found myself. 3 days later, Dr. Chen asked me how I was feeling about the family ultimatum.
Sad, I said honestly, but also relieved.
I spent so much energy trying to maintain relationships that required me to sacrifice my well being. Without that pressure, I have energy for relationships that actually support me. Tell me about those relationships. My coworkers have been incredibly supportive. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, has become like a grandmother to me. I've started dating someone who knows the whole story and respects how I've handled it. How does it feel to have people in your life who support your choices? Revolutionary. I didn't realize how exhausting it was to constantly defend my boundaries until I found people who respected them automatically. What about the loneliness? I'm less lonely now than I was when I was surrounded by family members who wanted me to be someone else. That's a profound insight, Vivian. 6 weeks after the ultimatum deadline, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice asked for me by name. This is Detective Ryan Murphy with Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about your sister, Cassandra Torres. My stomach dropped. Is she okay? She's fine, physically, but she's been attempting to contact you from federal prison through third parties. We've received reports of harassment from several sources. What kind of harassment? Phone calls to your workplace, letters to your neighbors, even contact with your apartment management company, all claiming to be concerned family friends trying to facilitate reconciliation. She's doing this from prison? Federal inmates have access to phone systems and mail services. She appears to be using those resources to orchestrate continued pressure on you. Is that illegal? It's violation of her federal sentence conditions. I'm coordinating with the FBI and prison administration to document the pattern. What does that mean for her? Additional disciplinary action, possibly additional charges. Federal prisoners aren't allowed to harass crime victims. Detective Murphy, I want this to stop. I understand. We're working on it. In the meantime, document any contact you receive from unknown parties asking about family reconciliation or your sister's situation. That afternoon, my apartment manager called. Ms. Torres, I had an unusual conversation today. A woman called claiming to be your sister's friend, asking about your lease terms and whether you seemed stable as a tenant. What did you tell her? Nothing. I don't discuss tenant information with unauthorized parties. But she was persistent, asking whether you paid rent on time, whether you caused problems, whether you seemed emotionally stable. Did she give her name? She said her name was Jennifer, that she was concerned about family conflicts affecting your housing stability. Jennifer, the same name as the supposed cellmate who had written to encourage prison visits. Thank you for not sharing information. Of course, but Ms. Torres, if someone is trying to undermine your tenancy, I thought you should know. That evening, I called Detective Murphy back. Detective, my apartment manager received a call from someone claiming to be my sister's friend, asking about my lease and stability as a tenant. We'll add that to the harassment documentation. Ms. Torres, your sister is clearly escalating her attempts to manipulate your situation. Why? Federal prisoners often become increasingly desperate as they realize their old manipulation tactics aren't working. She's probably hoping that professional or housing pressure will force you to contact her. Will it work? That depends on you, but I want you to know that her behavior is illegal and will result in consequences. 2 days later, I received a call at work from someone claiming to be a journalist writing about family reconciliation after criminal convictions. Ms. Torres, I'm researching stories about families healing after legal difficulties. Your situation with your sister has been brought to my attention as a potential case study. How did you hear about my situation? A family friend reached out, concerned about the impact of prolonged estrangement on family healing. What family friend? She didn't want to be identified, but she expressed hope that sharing your story might encourage other families facing similar challenges. I'm not interested in being interviewed. I understand this is sensitive, but family reconciliation stories can be inspiring for other people dealing with similar situations. My situation involves federal fraud and appropriate consequences. There's nothing inspiring about enabling criminal behavior. But there could be something inspiring about forgiveness and family healing. I hung up immediately and called Detective Murphy. Ms. Torres, this fits the pattern. We believe your sister is contacting media outlets, claiming to be family friends, and trying to create pressure for reconciliation. How is she doing this from prison? Federal inmates can make phone calls and send letters. She's probably identified reporters who cover family interest stories and contacted them with a narrative about family estrangement. Can you stop this?
We're documenting everything. The prison administration is reviewing her communication privileges. That weekend, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on my door, holding a small bouquet of flowers and a concerned expression. Mija, I had a strange visitor today. A young woman claiming to be your cousin, asking about your well-being. What did she look like? Early 20s, very thin, nervous. She said the family was worried about you living alone, that they wanted to make sure you were taking care of yourself. What did you tell her? I told her you were a wonderful neighbor and that your personal life was none of my business. But she kept asking questions. Whether you seemed depressed, whether you had friends, whether you talked about feeling isolated. Mrs. Rodriguez, my family has been trying to pressure me into visiting my sister in federal prison. This was probably another attempt at manipulation. Federal prison? What did your sister do? She stole my identity and committed fraud for 8 months. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression hardened. And your family wants you to visit her? They think family loyalty should override everything else. Mija, family loyalty means not stealing from family in the first place. That evening, I sat in my apartment thinking about the escalating harassment campaign. Cassandra was orchestrating contact from multiple angles. Fake journalists, supposed cousins, concerned friends, all designed to pressure me into breaking my boundaries. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt something unexpected: pride. Every attempt at manipulation was failing because I'd learned to recognize the tactics and trust my instincts. I called Dr. Chen. Vivian, you sound different, stronger. I think I am stronger. 6 months ago, all this pressure would have broken me down. Now I can see it clearly as manipulation and respond accordingly. What's changed? I've learned that protecting my boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. I've learned that enabling bad behavior doesn't help anyone, it just perpetuates harm.
And how does that feel? Empowering, like I finally understand my own worth. The harassment continued for another 2 weeks before it suddenly stopped. Detective Murphy called to explain why. Miss Torres, your sister has been moved to a different facility with more restricted communication privileges. The pattern of harassment has been documented in her file, and any future attempts will result in additional charges. Is this over? For now, but you should be aware that when she's released in 4 years, she might resume contact attempts. I'll deal with that if it happens. Miss Torres, if you don't mind me saying, you've handled this situation remarkably well. Many crime victims struggle with family pressure to reconcile with perpetrators. I had good professional support. You also had good instincts about protecting yourself. That night, I realized something important. I'd survived the worst of it. The initial crime, the family betrayal, the isolation, the harassment campaign. I'd maintained my boundaries, protected my well-being, and emerged stronger. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. 2 years into Cassandra's sentence, I received an unexpected letter in my mailbox. Not from her, but from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The envelope was official, crisp, with my name typed precisely across the front. Inside was a notification that my sister had applied for early release consideration based on completion of educational and rehabilitation programs. The letter requested victim input on the early release application. I had 30 days to submit a statement supporting or opposing her request for supervised release after serving half her sentence. I held the letter for several minutes, feeling nothing. No anger, no anxiety, no rush of old emotions. Just a distant recognition that this was another decision point in a story that had fundamentally changed my life. I called attorney Lou, who was now working in private practice, but had agreed to stay available for consultation on restitution matters. Miss Torres, early release applications are fairly common in federal cases where inmates demonstrate significant rehabilitation efforts. What kind of rehabilitation efforts? According to the documentation I received, your sister completed a bachelor's degree in business administration, participated in financial counseling programs, and served as a mentor for other inmates dealing with addiction and impulse control issues. She got a college degree in prison? Federal facilities offer educational opportunities. She apparently maintained a perfect academic record and completed her degree in 18 months. I found myself feeling something unexpected, a tiny flicker of pride. Cassandra had always been intelligent, but she'd never applied herself academically. The idea that she'd used prison time to earn a degree showed a level of discipline I'd never seen from her.
What about the restitution? She's paid approximately $800 over 2 years. At her current rate, full restitution would take several decades. So, if she gets early release, she'd be out in 2 years instead of 4, but I'd still be waiting decades for repayment. That's correct. However, her earning potential with a college degree would presumably be higher than prison wages. Attorney Liu, what do you think I should do? That's entirely your decision. Some victims support early release because it accelerates restitution payments. Others oppose it because they believe the full sentence should be served regardless of institutional behavior. That evening, I called Dr. Chen, who I still saw monthly for what we now called maintenance therapy. Vivian, how do you feel about the possibility of your sister being released early? Honestly, I don't feel much of anything. 2 years ago, this would have sent me into an anxiety spiral. Now it feels like information about a stranger. That's significant growth. Is it wrong that I don't care whether she gets out early or serves her full sentence? It's healthy. You've separated your well-being from her consequences. Her sentence length doesn't affect your daily life anymore. But should I have an opinion about whether she's rehabilitated? Do you have any evidence of rehabilitation beyond institutional programs? I thought about that question for several days. Had Cassandra demonstrated genuine change, or had she simply learned to work within the prison system? Getting a college degree was impressive, but it didn't address the fundamental character issues that had led to 8 months of systematic fraud. The following week, I made a decision that surprised even me. I requested a phone call with Cassandra through the prison administration. I hadn't spoken to her since her arrest 3 years earlier, but something about the early release application made me want to hear her voice, to assess for myself whether she'd genuinely changed or simply become more sophisticated in her manipulation. The call was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 o'clock. I took the afternoon off work and sat in my apartment, staring at the phone as the appointment time approached. When it rang, the automated system announced that I was receiving a call from a federal inmate and asked if I would accept the charges. I pressed 1. Vivian? Her voice was different, quieter, less confident than I remembered. She sounded smaller somehow. Hello, Cassandra. I can't believe you agreed to talk to me. I've been hoping for this for 3 years. I got the notification about your early release application. That's why you called? Not because you missed me or wanted to repair our relationship? I called because I wanted to understand whether you've actually changed or whether you've just learned to manipulate the prison system. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment. I deserve that question. Yes, you do. Vivian, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you. Not just the identity theft, but the years of smaller manipulations, the way I used your generosity and love against you. And what conclusions have you reached? That I was selfish and entitled and completely disconnected from how my choices affected other people. That I treated you like a resource instead of a person. Her words sounded genuine, but I'd heard Cassandra sound genuine many times before. What's different now? I spent 18 months in therapy working through why I felt entitled to take what wasn't mine, why I justified hurting people who loved me, why I never developed the ability to earn things honestly. And what did you discover? That I was terrified of being ordinary, of working regular jobs for regular money and living within normal means. I wanted the lifestyle I saw on social media, and I was willing to steal it rather than earn it. Do you understand the impact of what you did to me? You lost your financial security, your credit rating, your family relationships. You had to rebuild your entire support system because I made loving me toxic for you. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that she was acknowledging realities she'd previously denied. Cassandra, why should I support your early release? Because keeping me in prison longer doesn't serve any purpose except revenge, and you're not a revenge-seeking person. Because I can start paying real restitution if I'm working a regular job instead of earning $12 a month. How do I know you won't just resume the same patterns when you're released? You don't. I know that. But I can tell you that I've spent 3 years living with the consequences of my choices, and I never want to feel this powerless again. Powerless? I destroyed every relationship that mattered to me. I lost your respect, mom and dad's trust, the ability to make my own decisions about where I live and what I do each day. The luxury lifestyle I stole lasted 8 months. The consequences have lasted 3 years and counting. We talked for 20 more minutes. Cassandra told me about her college courses, her work in the prison library, her participation in a financial literacy program where she taught other inmates about budgeting and debt management. She asked about my life, my job, whether I was happy.
I found myself answering honestly. I told her about my promotion to charge nurse, my relationship with Marcus, the apartment I'd bought with a mortgage in my own name. I told her about therapy, about learning to set boundaries, about building relationships based on mutual respect. "You sound different," she said near the end of the call. "How so?" "Confident, like you know exactly who you are and what you're worth." "I do know that now." "I'm glad. Even if you can never forgive me, I'm glad you found yourself." After we hung up, I sat in my living room feeling emotionally drained, but also oddly peaceful. Cassandra had sounded genuine, but more importantly, I'd realized that her rehabilitation didn't depend on my forgiveness or support. She was working to change herself because prison had made continuing her old patterns impossible, not because she was trying to manipulate me into enabling her again. That weekend, I drove to Sedona with Marcus to think about the early release decision. We hiked Cathedral Rock, the red stone formations rising dramatically against the blue sky, and I found myself talking through my conflicted feelings about Cassandra's request. "What does your gut tell you?" Marcus asked as we sat overlooking the valley. "That she probably has changed, at least to some extent. Prison broke down the lifestyle that was supporting her denial. She's had to face reality in a way she never did before. But you're still hesitant about supporting early release." "I don't want to be responsible for the decision either way. Whether she gets out early or serves her full sentence should be based on objective criteria, not on whether the victim she manipulated for years is feeling charitable." "That makes sense. But I also don't want to oppose her release out of spite. If she's genuinely rehabilitated and ready to reintegrate into society, keeping her in prison longer doesn't benefit anyone." Marcus was quiet for a few minutes, looking out over the red rock landscape. "What if you wrote a statement that focuses on facts rather than recommendations?" "What do you mean?" "Describe the impact of her crimes. Acknowledge the rehabilitation efforts she's made, but let the parole board make the decision based on their professional assessment." That evening, I drafted a victim impact statement that felt honest and balanced. The defendant's crimes had significant impact on my financial stability, credit rating, and family relationships. The systematic nature of the fraud, conducted over 8 months, demonstrated deliberate disregard for my well-being and financial security. However, I acknowledge that the defendant has completed educational and counseling programs during her incarceration. Whether these efforts represent genuine rehabilitation is best determined by correctional professionals familiar with her institutional behavior. I neither support nor oppose early release, but I trust the Federal Bureau of Prisons to make decisions based on appropriate criteria for public safety and successful reintegration. I submitted the statement the following Monday, feeling relieved to have made a decision that honored both the severity of Cassandra's crimes and the possibility of her rehabilitation. 3 weeks later, I received notification that her early release application had been denied. The parole board cited insufficient time served relative to the scope of the financial crimes, but noted that she would be eligible to reapply in 12 months. I felt nothing in particular about the decision. Cassandra would serve at least 3 of her 4-year sentence, possibly more if her next application was also denied. The timeline didn't affect my daily life or my ongoing healing process. 6 months later, my life took an unexpected turn when I was offered a position as Director of Patient Services at a new medical facility in Denver. The salary was substantial, the responsibilities aligned with my career goals, and the opportunity to build a program from the ground up was professionally exciting. But moving to Denver would mean leaving behind the support system I'd built in Phoenix. Dr. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, my coworkers who had supported me through the identity theft crisis, even Marcus, who wasn't ready to relocate for a relationship that was still relatively new. I spent weeks weighing the decision, ultimately realizing that my hesitation had nothing to do with the job itself and everything to do with fear of starting over again. The identity theft had taught me how quickly life could change, how important it was to have people you could trust when crisis hit.
But it had also taught me that I was stronger than I'd believed, more resilient than I'd given myself credit for. I could build new relationships, create new support systems, thrive in new environments. I accepted the position and gave Phoenix General 6 weeks' notice. My last session with Dr. Chen was emotional in ways I hadn't expected. Vivian, when you first came to see me, you were consumed with family trauma and financial abuse. Now you're making major career decisions based on your own aspirations rather than other people's expectations. It feels like a lifetime ago. What's the biggest change you've experienced? I used to think that loving people meant absorbing the consequences of their poor choices. Now I understand that real love sometimes means allowing people to face those consequences. And how do you feel about the family relationships you've lost? Sad, but not regretful. I lost relationships that required me to compromise my integrity and well-being. That's not actually a loss. What about your sister? I hope she continues working on herself. I hope she finds healthy ways to build the life she wants. But her healing isn't my responsibility, and my healing doesn't depend on her rehabilitation. That's profound growth, Vivian. My last week in Phoenix was filled with goodbye dinners and farewell gatherings. Mrs. Rodriguez cried when I told her about the move, but she also expressed pride in my courage to pursue new opportunities. Mija, you came to this building broken by family betrayal. You're leaving as a woman who knows her worth and pursues her dreams. That's beautiful growth. Marcus and I had difficult conversations about the future of our relationship. He wasn't ready to leave his medical practice in Phoenix, and I wasn't willing to turn down the Denver opportunity. We decided to maintain contact, but acknowledged that the distance would likely lead to an eventual end of our romantic relationship. "I'm proud of you for choosing yourself," he said the night before I left. 3 years ago, you would have stayed in Phoenix to maintain relationships even if it meant sacrificing your career goals. 3 years ago, I didn't understand that I was allowed to prioritize my own aspirations. Will you keep in touch? Of course. You've been an important part of my healing process. The drive from Phoenix to Denver took me through spectacular landscapes that felt symbolic of the journey I'd been on since Cassandra's arrest. Desert giving way to mountains, familiar territory transforming into new possibilities. My new apartment in Denver was larger than anything I'd lived in before, with mountain views and space for the home office I'd always wanted. For the first time in my adult life, I was furnishing a space based entirely on my own preferences, without considering anyone else's opinions or needs. The first few weeks were challenging as I adjusted to new job responsibilities and tried to build social connections in an unfamiliar city. But I'd learned to be comfortable with my own company, to trust my ability to create meaningful relationships, to navigate challenges without needing rescue from others. My new position was demanding but fulfilling. I was responsible for developing patient care protocols, training nursing staff, and implementing quality improvement initiatives. The work required long hours and significant responsibility, but it also provided opportunities for professional growth that had been limited in my previous role. 3 months into the Denver position, I received an unexpected call from Maria. "Vivian, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your new number from your old apartment manager." "Of course it's okay. How are you doing?" "I'm good. I wanted to tell you about something that happened at Christmas dinner." "What kind of something?" "Your parents brought up your sister's situation, and for the first time, some family members started questioning whether you'd made the right choice." "What changed their minds?" "Your cousin David's son got arrested for credit card fraud last month. David was talking about pressing charges, and your mom said he should handle it privately to protect family relationships. David got really angry and said that was exactly the kind of thinking that enables criminal behavior." That must have been an uncomfortable conversation. It was, but it got people thinking about the difference between protecting family and enabling crime. Your uncle even said he thought you'd been brave to hold Cassandra accountable. How do my parents feel about this shift in opinion? They're still defending their position, but they're more isolated in that view than they used to be. Maria, I appreciate you telling me, but I want you to know that family validation doesn't change anything for me. I made the right choice for my own well-being, regardless of whether anyone else understands that. I know, but I thought you'd want to know that some people have come around to understanding your perspective. After we hung up, I realized how much I'd changed. 3 years ago, hearing that family members were beginning to support my position would have felt like vindication, like an opening for reconciliation. Now it felt like interesting but irrelevant information. My peace didn't depend on their understanding, and my choices didn't require their validation.
A year later, Cassandra sent a different kind of letter. Instead of restitution payment updates, she included information about her life and a cautious invitation. Dear Vivian, I know we haven't spoken since my arrest 6 years ago, and I don't want to pressure you for contact that might be unwelcome, but I wanted you to know that I'm engaged to a man who knows my complete history and supports my continued commitment to accountability and honesty. We're planning a small wedding in Santa Fe this fall. I would understand completely if you prefer not to attend, but I wanted you to know that you're welcome if you choose to come. Whether we ever rebuild a relationship or not, I want you to know that holding me accountable probably saved my life. Prison forced me to confront behaviors that would have eventually destroyed me completely. I'm grateful for your strength in refusing to enable my choices, even though I hated you for it at the time. I hope you're well and happy. Cassandra. I discussed the invitation with James and Dr. Chen, exploring my feelings about potentially seeing Cassandra for the first time since her arrest. How do you feel about the possibility of attending? Dr. Chen asked. Curious, mainly. I want to see for myself whether the change is genuine or whether she's just gotten better at appearing reformed. And if the change is genuine? Then I'm glad for her, but that doesn't automatically mean I want a close relationship. Some damage takes longer to heal than others. What would attending the wedding represent for you? Acknowledgement that she's made sustained changes, without necessarily committing to rebuilding sisterhood. I decided to attend the wedding, bringing James for support and maintaining the option to leave early if the situation felt uncomfortable or manipulative. The ceremony was held in a small chapel in Santa Fe, surrounded by mountains and fall foliage. Cassandra looked genuinely happy but also nervous when she saw me arrive. Her fiancé, David, was a social worker who specialized in addiction recovery and had his own history of rebuilding his life after destructive choices. During the reception, Cassandra approached me cautiously. Vivian, I can't believe you came. You invited me. I hoped you would, but I didn't expect it. I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing well, really well, working, engaged, living honestly for the first time in my adult life. I'm glad. Vivian, I know I can never undo what I did to you. I know that saying sorry doesn't repair the damage or rebuild trust, but I want you to know that I think about it every day, not in a self-pitying way, but as motivation to keep living differently. That sounds healthy. Do you think we could ever have some kind of relationship? Not like before, I know that's impossible, but maybe something new, built on who we are now rather than who we were? I looked at my sister, seeing someone who appeared genuinely changed, but also recognizing that trust would require much more time and evidence. Maybe someday, but it would have to be a relationship between equals, built on mutual respect and honesty. No family obligation, no guilt, no assumptions about forgiveness. I understand, and if that day never comes, I understand that too. James and I left the reception early, but I felt good about attending. Cassandra appeared to have made genuine changes, but more importantly, I'd been able to interact with her without compromising my boundaries or feeling manipulated into commitments I wasn't ready to make. On the drive home to Denver, James asked how I felt about the possibility of gradually rebuilding a relationship with Cassandra. Cautiously optimistic, I said. She seems to understand that trust has to be earned through sustained behavior, not demanded through family connections. And if she maintains these changes, then maybe we can have some kind of relationship, but it will be a new relationship based on who we've both become, not an attempt to recover what we lost. 2 years passed with occasional contact between Cassandra and me. Holiday cards, brief updates, acknowledgments of major life events. She didn't pressure for more contact or express resentment about my caution. The interactions felt healthy and respectful, free from the manipulation that had characterized our previous relationship. When James and I announced that we were expecting our first child, Cassandra sent a thoughtful gift and a card that made me cry. Dear Vivian, congratulations on your pregnancy. You're going to be an amazing mother.
Your child will be lucky to have someone who understands the importance of boundaries, accountability, and unconditional love that doesn't enable harmful behavior. I hope someday I can meet my niece or nephew, but I understand that will depend on continued demonstration of the changes I've made. Thank you for teaching me what real family love looks like, even when it meant letting me face consequences for my choices. Cassandra. The card represented something I'd never expected, genuine understanding from my sister about why I'd made the choices I did. Not resentment, not manipulation, but gratitude for the accountability that had ultimately helped her build a better life. When our daughter Emma was born, I felt a fierce protective instinct that gave me new perspective on the choices I'd made years earlier. I would do anything to protect this child from harm, including harm from family members who might try to manipulate or take advantage of her. The boundaries I'd set with my own family suddenly felt not just reasonable, but essential. Cassandra sent a beautiful handmade baby blanket and a card expressing hope that she might someday earn the privilege of being part of Emma's life. The gift felt genuine and appropriate, free from pressure or expectation. 6 months after Emma's birth, my mother asked if she could visit to meet her granddaughter. The request felt natural and welcome. Our relationship had continued healing over the years, built on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. During her visit, my mother held Emma with tears in her eyes and said something that completed our healing process. "Vivian, watching you with your daughter, I understand now what I should have done when Cassandra was stealing from you. Real love means protecting people from harm, even when the person causing harm is someone you love too. Thank you, Mom. You chose the hard path of accountability over the easy path of enabling. That took courage I didn't have. You have it now. I learned it from watching you." As I write this, Emma is 2 years old and our life in Denver is full and peaceful. James and I have built careers we're passionate about, surrounded ourselves with friends who share our values, and created a home based on honesty and mutual respect. I maintain limited but positive contact with Cassandra, who continues demonstrating sustained change through her actions, rather than demanding immediate trust through family connections. She's working as a financial counselor for a nonprofit organization, helping other people rebuild their lives after making destructive choices. Her marriage appears healthy and stable. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something healthier than it was even before the identity theft crisis. It's based on mutual respect and adult equality rather than childhood patterns of obligation and guilt. Most importantly, I've learned that protecting your boundaries isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. That holding people accountable for their choices isn't cruelty, it's love. That building relationships based on mutual respect rather than familial obligation creates stronger, healthier connections. The identity theft crisis that began with a phone call from the FBI ultimately led to the most important realization of my life. I am worthy of relationships that honor my well-being, respect my boundaries, and support my choices. Everyone deserves that kind of love, including from their own family. The woman who received that first frightening call from Agent Walsh was someone who absorbed other people's problems, enabled harmful behavior, and sacrificed her own well-being to maintain family peace. The woman writing this story is someone who knows her worth, protects her boundaries, and builds relationships based on mutual respect and accountability. That transformation required losing relationships I thought were essential, but it led to finding relationships that actually were. It required family disapproval and criticism, but it led to self-respect and authentic connections. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable harmful behavior, even when that behavior comes from people you love. Sometimes the healthiest choice is protecting yourself from manipulation, even when the manipulation comes from family. I don't regret any of the choices I made during the most difficult period of my life. I regret that those choices were necessary, but I'm proud of the strength it took to make them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.